businesses in in Old Town that are participate in Arts Alive because they used to be alternative galleries. Um, so then we continued on. Um, let's see here. There we go. We are being recorded, um, which is good. Okay, let's see. So at one point, well, Ink People has always been a grassroots organization. We were artists running the organization for artists. Uh, so we've always held a viewpoint that the community really knows what it needs. We're not really in a position to know what the community needs. We may have an idea, some kind of little thought about maybe, it needs this or it needs that. But we found that if we listen to people and if we're open to new things or to doing things differently, that working with community members, whether they're artists or non-artists, and basically I think everyone's an artist, they just haven't admitted it yet. So we have waited and listened to people and are informed and created a program called the DreamMaker program that basically, there were two things. One of them is listening to the community, and the other one is that over our first few years of being around, up until about, I think, 84, we saw a lot of people who had great ideas. And in those days, everybody thought, well, I have to become a 501c3 tax exempt nonprofit organization, which involves incorporating in the state of California and then getting IRS designation. And it takes anywhere from 18 months from 2 years generally to do that. So that's a long time. When you have this passionate idea, and of course life moves on, and we saw a lot of those great ideas die. People just ran out of energy after all the bureaucratic stuff, or they, their lives moved on, and they were doing other things by the time things came together. And it's expensive too now. So we started thinking about how we could help these wonderful dreams, really happen in the community, and started the DreamMaker program. One of our first was called Rural Art Services. Was an organization that helped the 17 Northern California counties artists learn how to market their work and be business people. And the California Arts Council wanted to give them money, but because they weren't incorporated and not a 501c3, they needed a fiscal receiver. So that became our first DreamMaker program, although we weren't calling it that yet. But that's what happened. Our first real DreamMaker program was called the Intertribal Coalition for Cultural Continuity. And it was started by a number of Native American culture bearers who saw that they were losing the knowledge from their elders as their elders died, and it wasn't being passed on. So we helped them get grant funding for workshops to teach these regalia making and songs and other kinds of traditional philosophies. And each of the people who came to the workshops then went back to their communities and created circles of learners within those communities. And then those people went out to their individual communities and family groups and started their circles of learners. So after a while, we didn't need the Intertribal Coalition anymore. And, that to me is probably one of our best DreamMakers. So you see here on the right side the DreamMaker program, and it also lists KIPE FM community radio. We have a license. We're in the process of trying to build a tower on Table Bluff Wiyot Reservation in partnership with the Wiyot tribe. And it will be a indigenous and Spanish language radio station. So that's one of the things we do that most people don't know about. We do give, before the pandemic, we were giving quite a few workshops and classes, everything from Karuk language to English as a second language to children's art. And one of our DreamMakers now is doing senior art with seniors. That's Maureen McGarry's program, Art for the Young at Heart. I think she just started a new class for this semester. And over the years, we've had artists in residence who either through the California Arts Council or working in collaboration with government agencies. We put in schools in the community. The Rural Borough Mural Bureau ran for many years making murals around Eureka as a partnership between the Ink People, Eureka Main Street, and the Eureka Redevelopment Agency. And when the redevelopment agency went away, unfortunately, the program had to close. But now Eureka Street Art Festival has taken it up and are also beautifying the city now with murals in specific areas. So this last year they did Henderson Center as kind of a physically distanced festival. And they're, every year they're just amazing murals that happen. And so Eureka has become what's known as a mural city. And I do want to kind of go back. Brenda and I discussed for a long time, where to locate, because we were both out of HSU. So we thought about locating in Arcata. And at the time, Arcata actually had some galleries and was a pretty good art spot. And we just decided that Eureka needed more help. So we decided to locate the Ink People in Eureka. Although we do serve not only the whole county, but beyond. And lately we've been strengthening our ties with Del Norte County and Trinity County, doing a new program I'll talk about a little bit later.
Libby?
Yeah.
We have some questions in the chat. First of all, some kudos for the mural program and the revitalization that has caused for our community. And then there's a question about, is the radio station yet operating, and when will it begin, and how do people access that?
Okay, so thank you for the kudos on the mural program. It's really wonderful. So KIPE is broadcasting from the roof tip of a working cattle ranch barn on Singley Hill in above Fortuna, and it's rebroadcasting Radio Bilingue, courtesy of KHSU, or well, somehow. Anyway, with all those changes with KHSU going away and everything, it's just kind of confusing, but the radio engineer who works there has kept up our feed. And you can hear it in around Fortuna, and I think about up to halfway into the Eureka Mall. So we're not doing any of our own content creation yet, because we have to get a tower that will have a little studio attached. But Radio Bilingue is in English and Spanish. It is basically like National Public Radio for the bilingual community, and it's out of the original. One was in Fresno. A wonderful man named Hugo Morales started it and is still the executive director. So let's see, what's the call sign? I think it's like 87.2, something like that. It's FM. I'm sorry, I don't have that, and I'm not wearing my Radio Bilingue t-shirt, so, or my KIPE t-shirt. We do have t-shirts, and we have some lovely little posters available in our online store. So if you do want to check out our website, of course, it's inkpeople.org, and it's INK, because we were printmakers. Some people try to make us into a incorporated, but we are incorporated, but that's not part of our name. So were there other questions?
I think you just answered it with the website information.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was just looking at this little graphic, and I was surprised it wasn't on there. But eventually we'll have to redo this. Katy, Texas took over the Rural Borough Mural Bureau program from Dwayne Flatmo, and ran it for about 8 years, and then became our artistic director. And then last February, she left us to take the job as executive director for Scrap Humboldt. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, they closed down. So now she's a Eureka City Council member, and we're very proud of her. But we may have to ask her to update and redo this wonderful graphic. That's just kind of as an overview thing, and something that's not immediately apparent and that we don't even mention, is that we have trained a lot of people who came to us as volunteers or work study students or full employees, and then moved on to other places. And in 2011, I was honored by the Americans for the Arts, which is a national service organization for arts organizations, and the National Endowment for the Arts, with an award for community leadership. And it's actually the Americans for the Arts Conference is my favorite arts conference. So I try to go whenever possible and attend now virtually. So that year, I can't remember what city it was in, all the hotels look the same and they kind of blend together in memory. But after I had stood up on stage and been given the award, the rest of the conference, I had people from all over the country come up to me and say, thank you for training or working with so-and-so who came to our community and just did wonderful things. And to me, that was like better than the award, to see the kind of impact that we've been able to have. And that's another thing about the ink people that's kind of unusual. I mean, we do get a lot of people working with us and moving on. And at one point, Brenda was going like, "Oh my God, why can't we keep anybody?" And I said, "Well, you know, it's okay, because they're going to go out and, you know, do other things, and we're really just training them, and we have to get into that mindset that it's okay to train people all the time and keep training them." At one point, when I was working with the Association of Humboldt Artists, which was a brief thing, we did a big series of workshops about how to market your art, and you know, had all these artists who attended, and you know, at the end of it, we brought in outside, you know, speakers, and at the end of it, I was sitting in my office feeling pretty good about having trained all these people, and the phone rang, and it was somebody, an artist, saying, "How do I market my art?" And I just sat there a moment and realized that this was going to be an ongoing education project, because you can't reach everybody all at once, and different people are always coming up in the community, and you know, it's just, you have to just relax into it and decide that you're just going to be teaching for the rest of your life. And that's okay. That's good. So that's another thing that we've done. We do also a lot of public art besides the murals. We've been working, we worked with the city of Eureka to create art benches along the waterfront trail. We got a wonderful grant from the California Arts Council to make that happen and be able to pay the artists. We've been involved with the Eureka Art and Culture Commission since about 2005. We're the City of Eureka's officially designated local arts agency. And I don't actually sit on the commission. I'm kind of like the, you know, the history and resource person to, you know, when you've been around long enough, you can carry a certain amount of history, and sometimes it's too much history. So you have to know when to bring it up and when not to. Doing the public art has, I've always, for a long time, I've had a dream of doing something like the Work Projects Administration from the 1930s, which Franklin Roosevelt created to put people to work. And there was an art part of it that put a lot of artists to work, painters and playwrights and poets and photographers, and all kinds of artists were sent out across the country to create art with community. And to me, that's always been a really wonderful kind of thing. And they got paid for it, which artists are often asked to do things for free, to donate their time. And yet we've tried to ask lawyers to donate their time, and it doesn't happen often. So artists have to eat too. And They have spent many years developing their skills and their arts, and they need to get paid for that. So when the pandemic hit a year ago, February, and then we had to shut down in mid-March, we started seeing, tremendous pain in the art community. I don't know what the local figures are, but nationally, 95% of all artists in all mediums lost employment or income. About 60% of organizations shut down, arts organizations. And this was on top of, in California, the Assembly Bill 5, which said that contractors, independent contractors, had to be changed to employees. So for small arts organizations all across the state, it was really difficult to decide, whether they could keep their doors open or not. And now the AB 5 has been a target of constant changes as different kinds of groups have lobbied them to be accepted or made an exception from the law, including arts organizations and independent, like musicians and people who are actors once in a while and have another job. Anyway, it created a lot of chaos. So before the pandemic, there were already a lot of smaller arts organizations that had basically shut down and put their programming on hold because of that. And then with the pandemic, many of them have just gone out of business. So it's really devastated the arts community. So one of our board members, Leslie Castellano, who also runs a DreamMaker program called Synapsis, had seen a lot of this anguish happening on Facebook. And she called me and said, what can we do? Can we start a, excuse me, a Facebook fundraiser? So she did that. Sorry. And so money, people are so generous. It's just amazing. Money started coming into that, and we quickly set up a program to, I know it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but to give artists $50 in a Visa card. And we raised about $8,000 in almost no time, and then distributed those $8,000 to artists who registered, they just had to say that they had experienced financial hardship. And another basic philosophy of the Ink people is we just tend to trust people. And I believe in karma, so, it all works. When we were in our Muni's place, we were 24/7 available for artists to use the studios. If they registered, and we gave them keys to the place so they could be in the studio 24/7, any time of day or night, depending on their biorhythm. And it worked. We had, we usually had about 70 keys out, and it worked. People did not abuse it, and it was, pretty good deal. We really miss those facilities, which we lost in 2010 because of big earthquake. Anyway, getting back to the public art. So not only did we were we able to give out the Visa cards for $50, but we got a call from the Ingrid Nicholson Trust um, who would give us about $3,000 to issue an additional $50 to women artists. And so that was wonderful. And we did that. And people, of course, were very grateful. And, but, you know, that ended. And so I was in communication with Craig Woods at the Humboldt Area Foundation, who, you know, raised a large COVID relief fund. And what we came up with was a work projects administration like program called Funds for Artist Resilience, or FAR. So they gave us enough money for, and we also got additional funding from the Rose Perrinan Trust or Foundation, and the Wild Rivers Community Foundation, which is part of Humboldt Area Foundation. But they serve Del Norte and Trinity counties. So we put out a call to artists to come up with ideas of things, public art or activities to create that will help the community heal and revitalize, and, you know, we are resilient. So we were able to recently fund 5 projects in Humboldt County, 2 in Del Norte County, and 1 in Trinity County, which people are working on now, and it's really kind of wonderful. So we're still taking donations for that program, and hopefully we can do a second round in maybe 6 months, and who knows, maybe it would go on for even longer than that. And the arts are an amazing tool to use to heal. Many medical institutions, hospitals have finally understood that and have art in their facilities, as well as sometimes having really artists in residence who come in and either play music for patients or work with them. Artists working with people with disabilities. One of our DreamMaker projects is called Trajectory, and they work with disabled artists who are on a more professional track and can sell their art, enter shows, do those kinds of things with the help from special mentors. And it's a wonderful program. So the other area we work a lot in is with youth, especially youth at risk. And since 1997, we've had a program called the Mars Project, which started out, it was named by the kids as the Magic Action Reface Zone. But funders were not thrilled with that. So we changed it to the Media and Arts Resource Zone. And it's a free program. It was after school. Now we're working remotely with some people, but because a lot of the kids that we worked with are severely at risk and from very low economic situations, and sometimes dangerous family situations. Sorry, we're on 7th Street and we get the ambulances. anyway, so a lot of them don't have access to internet. So we got more funding from the Humboldt Health Foundation to buy 5 laptops that we can loan out to the students, and that's been really wonderful for them. And kind of additionally, another part of our working with youth is we have at present 5 artists working with youth in juvenile hall and in court-appointed community schools. And when they get out of, when they're on probation, they can come to the Mars Project. And so we've set up that nice little system of continued creative support so that they can not just fall back into bad patterns once they get out of juvenile hall. And it's really been a very successful program, and the correctional officers at juvenile hall have seen, really wonderful results with the youth. We also continually take on interns and do job training. It's a little harder now doing most things by Zoom, but we are continuing. We are kind of open very minimally by appointment for things that have to be done in person, like dropping off money or something like that for their programs. We have a gallery, which we have now transitioned to a virtual gallery. It's on our website, and we're trying to make the website easier to navigate to it, more clear. Back when we can have people in again, we have an arts and humanities library that's fairly extensive. And once a month, we put out the Ink News, which, kind of highlights artists and talks about what things are happening. And then mostly weekly, we send out the Ink Plotter as an email update of things that are happening in the community and things that can be accessed by over the internet if they're if they're from far away. We try to mostly do things that are free, so that everyone can take part in them. But it's become very popular, and we believe that especially in the pandemic, that it's important to offer as many alternatives and kind of engagement and enrichment activities that we can put out there. Let's see. One of the things, probably about 30 years ago, when I was working as the executive director of the Humboldt Arts Council, because the ink people didn't start paying me until like the 90s. Everything was volunteer up until then. So I had to have other jobs, to keep me fed. And working with Sally Arnott, she said she would go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings if I would go to the economic development meetings. So I did, and that started a long tradition of me being often the only woman and certainly the only arts advocate at economic development committee meetings in the county. And when I first started, there were like 48 different economic development organizations, and I think they're under 20 now. I think some of them merged and stuff. But that being at the economic development table reminding people about the importance of the arts in our economy, and kind of introducing the surprising concept to people that every artist is a small business, has really helped bring about the acknowledgement and support of the arts in our community, and really appreciation of the arts in our community, which has been a wonderful thing to see. We've grown a lot. We have over 100 DreamMaker projects. Those are all community initiated, run by your neighbors, and working with volunteers. Over the years, they've come and gone, and fortunately, they're not all active at once. So there are some that are active all year round, but many of them are just active at certain times in the year. It's really, I get bored easily, and the Ink People has never bored me. So that's been a really wonderful gift. And the other gift that I've had from the Ink People is getting to know so many people in the community and getting to work with them, and hear their hopes and dreams, and help them realize them. And we don't believe in doing it for them. We believe in helping people and supporting them in every way we can. And since a lot of artists aren't necessarily big on the business side, we DreamMaker projects, we do all the back office. We do the bookkeeping. We help them write grants. We help them develop community donation drives. Excuse me. And basically try to teach them how to be successful. And it's really, a lot of DreamMakers are time limited, in that they have a beginning, they have something they want to accomplish, and then they're finished. And the DreamMaker program makes it so much easier than going through the whole incorporation process, getting the nonprofit status, because you start up by getting. We do a feasibility talk. We once we're all in agreement with our requirements and what we expect from them, they make a presentation to the board of directors, and the board of directors actually adopts them as part of the Ink People. So they get immediate access to nonprofit benefits, our reputation in the community, and our 40 plus years of experience and know-how. So I'm not a big believer in reinventing the wheel. So if we can share what we know and help people be successful as painlessly as possible, that's a wonderful thing. There must be more questions. Sheila?
There are some thank yous in the chat, one from Donna Moxon and one from Lorraine Miller-Wolf. And then there is a question about what you expect the revival of the arts to be after the pandemic, and are there grants or other funding opportunities available?
So what I see is that it's going to be kind of a slow road building up again in the arts after the pandemic, but probably a lot of artists have transitioned to virtual if it's possible for their type of art for teaching and for showing. But theater companies, venues have been particularly hard hit. And so in the last care package that was, a relief package that was passed, there was there's a big chunk of it for the venues that have, I think they're calling it shuttered venues relief. It was originally a Save Our Stages. So our wonderful local theaters, Ferndale Rep, North Coast Rep, Redwood Curtain, Arcata Playhouse, Del Arte, have all been shuttered and, not able to really produce. A few of them have tried some virtual experiences with some really good success. But without people buying tickets, it's been economically crushing for those. I know that there's a huge hunger in the community to be together again, to experience live theater or live music, just really get together, have an Arts Alive where you can see your friends and, catch up on the news and, all that wonderful interaction. I really see the arts as being a big part of the healing process because we've all been traumatized in some way, some of us more than others. Excuse me. And I know that the arts will step up in ways that they haven't before, just because I think there will be funding to pay the artists. But yeah, it's going to be a while before we're out of this. But I see, I'm hoping that with the arts helping with the healing in the community, that people will really appreciate and stop taking them for granted, and really start. We need to really integrate the arts into all our structures, into our government agencies, our schools, the churches, all aspects of our life are touch on the arts, and mostly we don't even notice it. I mean, artists design your clothes, artists design your cars, artists design your houses. Yes, architects are artists. So, because the arts are so pervasive, and because in our society we have separated the arts as a different kind of thing, than, like in Bali, where they say, we have no word for art because it's just part of life. It's part of everything we do. And they honor and cherish their artists.
Libby, that brings us to a great next question, and that's from Eve Anderson. She's wondering how an artist becomes a member of Ink People, and are there current studio facilities where an artist can create that's not easy to create at or install at home?
Okay, so you can become a member. We would love that. On our website, there's a place to become a member, or you can call us at 707-442-8413. That's 707-442-8413. And talk to Monica, and she can set you up. We have varying, varying levels, like most groups do. So starts, I think, at 25 for students and seniors, and and then artists are 35, and then there's family and angel, that kind of different categories. What was the second part of the question?
Is there studio space available? And then there was an additional part of the question is there a place that folks can display their art and market it as well?
Yes. Okay, studio space. The trajectory program has studio spaces. One of them is a clean space for non-liquid art forms. Another one is the dirty space. They have ceramics and a kiln, and you can paint there and those kinds of things. And then they have a printmaking space with all kinds of different ways to print different things. Everything from presses to like a risograph, and just wonderful things. And you can also contact Monica for information about those. To show art, we are still doing the alternative gallery program. It's shrunk quite a bit in the last few years, but that you can then show your work in a business place or government agency for 3 months at a time. And you have to be a member to do that. And to use those workspaces. We also make you become a member. Let's see. We are still doing at this point monthly shows but it's a virtual gallery, so you can go to either our website or call Monica, and she'll be and you can also reach her by email at inkers, INKERS, at inkpeople.org. And she will fill you in and all the details. I do have to say, 4 years ago, I gave my board 5-year notice that I was going to retire. And we've needed every second of it. We've been building up the board and making all kinds of wonderful manuals and how to do things, and they're trying to squeeze everything they can out of my brain, which is good. I won't go away totally, but because I plan to be here the rest of my life, but I won't be executive director. I'll just be the brain trust. And so I'll be retiring at the end of this year. And let's see, more questions?
I have a question or a comment, basically.
Okay.
I'm Lorna Peterson, and this year I happen to be the chairperson of our grant committee for Humboldt sponsors. And we've had the pleasure of receiving grant applications from the Ink People and several of your entities, and are so enthusiastic over all the work you've done for these many, many years. And of course, once we went into lockdown, there were 77 approved grants, and many of the groups, unfortunately, were not able to use their grants because they couldn't come up with an alternative. But the Ink People were so good at pivoting and providing those vital services, especially the Mars project. And it's just been my pleasure today to hear about all the other things that you're doing. So thank you so much. And congratulations to the team at Ink People for pivoting during a difficult time.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorna. Uh, yeah, and the North Star Quest Camp was also a recipient, and Sundance Ballet.
Yes.
And both of them, they're wonderful creative people, managed to figure out how to engage safely. Yeah. And
Bravo, bravo.
and we are so grateful for your support over these many years. It's truly been a blessing. Thank you.
Well, our grants are small, but we find we fill a niche that nobody else does. So our biggest fundraiser, the giant rummage sale at Redwood Acres, was canceled
Yeah.
last October, of course. But we've still got a grant season. The application's on Facebook, and we service any group who makes good things happens for kids from the ages of newborn to age 18.
All right. Thank you. Gee, I have another group that might be able to apply.
Well, the grant season I think it just opened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it needs to happen pretty quick. If any of you have groups.
I didn't realize you went that low. One of our DreamMakers is called Mother to Mother. They've been going on for over 30 years, but they lost their sponsorship when the leader retired from St. Joe's. And it's for newborns and their mothers. And it's a way for mothers to talk to adults and, get special coaching and also learn how to journal and really keep sane.
Well, thanks for all you do, and it's a pleasure to hear you and see you at this program.
Thank you. Thanks, Lorna.
Libby, we have a couple more questions. One is requesting a shout out to the Weaving Studio and their classes for post-pandemic interest. And another question about your succession planning. Are you looking for a replacement, or will the board be looking for a replacement?
Yes. First off, I do want to thank Linda Hartshorn and Nancy Kennedy for keeping the Weaving Studio running. Not now, but as soon as we can once be at least somewhat together again. And that's a wonderful resource in our community that we have an amazing fiber arts community. Okay, the second part there.
Wondering about your succession planning. Will the board be looking for a replacement for you? What's happening next for Ink People?
Right. Yeah, they are. So they have a plan, and they'll start advertising later this year, probably in the second half of the year. And we'll be doing an overlap. I'll be doing an overlap with the new person. And I keep telling them that when you get a new executive director, they will have their own vision. We want them to maintain the values of the Ink People, but there will be changes, and that's okay. The Ink People has always changed. We change even if we don't need to. I guess that's part of being an artist, and it keeps us fresh. It keeps us in tune with our community, and always listening, always looking for ways to respond. And another characteristic that we've tried to promote is if another group starts doing something in the community that we're doing, and we look and see that they're doing a great job at it, we're happy to give them the program. the resources and everything, because there's always more work to do. There's always, new niches to fill, new people to work with, and especially always continuing with the people that you have been serving for so many years. Like the French say, le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même. So it's the more it changes, the more it's the same. And that seems to be how it works out, probably because we're human beings and we can only change so much. We always have the same basic needs.
I had a question about whether you considered working with Arcata's Community Development Department to do for Arcata what you've accomplished for Eureka, and whether block grant funds are available.
I don't know about the block grant funds, but we've always worked with Arcata. And we're part of the strategic arts plan process, and Arcata Playhouse is a longtime partner, and we've worked together for many years. I've kind of mentored Jackie and encouraged her to become the local arts agency for Arcata, which she is really starting to leverage now. And it's great to see. So we try to. Here's my favorite visual image for the ink people. An iceberg has like 10% above the water line and 90% below. Well, we're an artberg. You see 10% above the water line, and then we've got all this other stuff going on below the water line. And probably every single one of you on this call today see a different 10%. So that, it just, to me, it's amazing what this has become. It's been an organic growth. It's been a lot of work and dedication and focus, but it's just, we believe that it's really helped to transform this community. We're a pretty amazing place here in Humboldt County. We're recognized in California as one of the most innovative areas. And I think that has a lot to do with the number of artists here, and the fact that creativity is accepted and encouraged. And Humboldt County is a pretty amazing place.
I had a question about the fact that a lot of people have electronic devices that are sitting around unused, or they've gotten something new. Have you considered asking people to donate those to you or your organization to make them available for at-risk youth?
Actually, that's a great idea. We hadn't. I think one thing that's kind of been keeping us from doing that is because a lot of old electronics are old and not necessarily that usable, because that darn electronic world keeps changing all the time. But that's a great idea, and I'll run that out to our wonderful Mars staff and see what they think. That's a great idea. Thank you.
I mean, rather than recycling them
Yeah.
that would make a whole lot more sense. And there are people who do help people learn how to use those.
Right.
So that's another whole aspect. And once people have their vaccinations, do you anticipate enabling people to assemble in person for your multiple activities? Have you considered putting up tents outdoors? I mean, once we have not this kind of weather, but where you could allow people to come and get together outside. I think Del Arte used to do that, and they'd have an outdoor plays.
Yeah, they have a big
Use
tent.
that same concept.
Yeah, we are so ready to be with people. It's just, it's been really difficult psychologically to be separated from all these wonderful people in this community. I work with a consortium called the Humboldt Creative Alliance that is made up mostly of theaters, but so I've had an ear to that suffering, and it's just huge because theater people are people. They work in teams, and they get so much from the audience, that the participation, watching the late night TV shows, like the late night with Stephen Colbert, listening to him talk about how not having the laughter as a response to the jokes is just kind of soul crushing. We are social animals, and we need that social connection. So as soon as we can, and as safely as we can, we will be getting back to different kinds of public things. One of the stories about the Mars Project, Corey Goldman is our Mars music mentor, and Jay Tillman is our Mars video and animation mentor. And so Corey has a young man who is interested in jazz saxophone. I think, he's young teens. And it was just impossible on Zoom, because of the Zoom delay, to really be successful virtually. So the young man comes over, and when it's not raining, they sit outside on the sidewalk. And Corey plays guitar, and this young man plays the saxophone. And it's just delightful to have that out there. And, before they used to do it in the studio, and nobody knew. But now they do. People drive by, they stop, they listen. It's just really been a lovely thing. So yes, as soon as we can, we're going to get together to gather.
I know you mentioned that you are writing things up to provide the history. Have you actually considered having somebody, in essence, debrief you, sit down and spend the time with you to put together a history of all the initiatives that you've done, what's worked, what hasn't, the kinds of suggestions you've got, and the things you'd love to do but haven't been able to do, the outreach activities that you've done, what's worked, what hasn't, so that rich treasury that you have brought into focus for everyone and introduced into our community doesn't get lost and can be transferred on to the next generation of ink people.
Probably not in that wonderful detail that you just described. We've done fits and starts, but have not. I even had one of our writers group offer to help me write a book. And that was several years ago, which I haven't started yet.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I kind of recall with my father, we provided him a journal. Well, nothing ever happened. I gave him a tape recorder, nothing ever happened. And so what I think works is that if you actually have an interview, hold on a minute. And I would think that might be a great project for your writers group, or for an intern from the arts program at HSU, if they know how to do such a thing. or somebody in the sociology department.
Yeah, that's a thought.
Because if you created an internship with a definitive charge,
Yeah,
perhaps it would happen. And you'd have to make the time, and so would they.
that's a great idea. We get a lot of requests from HSU to place interns from the business department and the social work department. And, we use them whenever we can. And I think that's a great idea to propose as a project.
Yeah, because in reality, you need to have it from several different perspectives: the economics of what you're doing, the sociological impacts of what you're doing. You need, in essence, a kind of a program evaluation and history,
Yeah,
and going forward, a future plan, where you want to go, what the options are, just a dump of ideas.
that sounds like fun, actually.
Well, it should be. That's the whole idea.
Yeah,
It should be fun, and it will not only document what you've done, but the whole range of ideas that you've been able to do, but also those that you haven't been able to do, but the vision you have for what it could be. And if you
yeah,
could get somebody inspired to do that, it would be very interesting for everybody.
yeah, thank you. And you reminded me of one more thing. um, this year, we were very honored to be one of 10 organizations in the state to host a Arts Administrator of Color Fellow. So we just started working with Nanette Kelly, who's Native American, and she's very interested in curriculum development about Native American culture and art. And I just see some really exciting things that are going to be happening in the future with this. So that's another thing.
Well, there's always another thing, don't you think?
Yeah, always. I mean, that's why I have no qualms about giving away programs.
Because there are always more
Yeah,
that are budding in your mind and in the community. Are there any other questions from anybody that they'd like to offer up? You have lots of kudos in here. Yes, we need to preserve Libby's wisdom and the history of the arts in this area that are a result of her energies. That's from Lorraine Miller-Wolf. You've got lots of thank yous here, and I hope you get a chance to look at them. Any other questions, anybody? Yay, nay? If not, I want to thank you all for coming and mention that next Monday on February 8th, same time, same station, we're going to have David Marshak, who's emeritus professor at Seattle University, talk about how youths are changing the world for the better now. And he has a publication that goes along with that, that he's written. And that's the direction we're going. Of course, at some point we need to have one on how the boomers and those of us over 50 are doing the same thing. That would be wonderful. So maybe we can make that happen another time. Thank you, Libby. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Sheila, do you have anything to add?
No, just thanks to everyone for being here.
You've been great, and this is wonderful. Thank you so much, Libby.
Thanks everybody for all you do for the arts.